Hello YouTube friends, Jenny here, and today what I have for you is my first ever episode of Floss Tube. Over the past couple months I've gotten really into watching everyone's floss tubes. It's sort of in the background while I'm working during the day, and then at the end of the day sometimes I'm still streaming them while I'm doing needlepoint. And it's just been so much fun. I really love getting to know you all and see everything that you've been stitching, and it's just sort of like having a stitching friend hanging out with me all day, and it really motivates me too. After a day of work, I'm really excited to get fired up with my stitching, so I thought it would be really fun to get to join in. So Floss Tube, episode 1. And I figured for today, since it's my first episode, I'll start by telling you a little bit about me and how I got into stitching and what sort of needlework I like to do. And then I thought I would show you some of my projects I've been working on, and then maybe some general chatter at the end. It sort of depends on how it all goes. I haven't filmed myself in a really long time, so I sort of have to get back in the groove, so we'll see how it goes. So about me, as I said, my name is Jenny. I live here in Southeast Massachusetts with my husband and 3 cats, Ginger, Taffy, and Woody. 2 of those cats are fast asleep right now, but Ginger might make an appearance. She's been following me around all morning, and she was just up and down off the couches, so you might see her. All right, by day I am usually a business analyst, but I'm on sort of a COVID-induced break from that line of work. Back when COVID was first getting started, and I was looking for my next, or getting ready to look for my next analytical job, I just thought, oh, it doesn't really make sense to try to go out and get a job right now with the world shutting down. Who knows what's going to happen? And you know, COVID will probably be over in like a month or 2. So I'll just wait it out. I think we know how that played out. So I haven't gone back yet. I'm actually actively searching for my next analytical job right now, but in the meantime, what I've been doing full-time is running my own little business. It's called Historically Dressed, and I sell historical clothing and accessories for dolls, ball jointed dolls and 18-inch dolls such as the American Girl dolls. I have sewn all of my life since I was a really little girl. I was just obsessed with the idea of it. I come from a long line of ladies who work with their hands and do crafts. There's knitters, sewers, even a bobbin lace maker, like going back through the generations. But it's really my grandmother that made me want to sew, because she's just a magnificent seamstress. She has made everything from fancy cocktail dresses to beautiful wool coats that you would think were high-end fashion, not homemade at all. Professional drapes, doll things for me, just you name it, she's made it. And just growing up around that and seeing her always at her machine and everything, it just made me inspired to try it. And then when I tried it, I was hooked. So all through my life, since I was a very little girl, I've sewn. And it started out with doll clothes and little things for my dollhouse. Like one time I made about 1 billion pillows for a dollhouse. And then I started getting out books on historic fashion from the library. Even as a little girl, I was just always obsessed with that, and Barbie started getting corsets and Victorian gowns, and it's just always been my jam. And then by the time I got into high school, I was making clothes for me, historic costume for me, and I've just never stopped since then. And over the years, I've also done some different kinds of embroidery, did a little bit of crewel embroidery. One of the projects I pulled to show you is a crewel project. But not a lot of the counted needleworks, like cross stitch and that kind of thing. But my mother, who is a really talented watercolor artist and an art teacher, when I was a little girl, went through a big time cross stitch phase. It was the 80s, and cross stitch was huge. We had local shops everywhere and everyone was cross stitching, and it was like good times for all. And I remember my mom stitching all of the time, and because she was doing it, I wanted to do it. And I remember having a few little projects going, and my memories of cross stitching are, this is frustrating, this is so disappointing, ugh. And it's because it always seemed like I'd get so many rows done, and I'd come back to work a second color and realize like, oh, 5 of those rows are off by 1 stitch. I gotta rip them out. Cool. Meanwhile, with my sewing, I wasn't having those disappointments, so I think you can see kind of which hobby I sort of went towards and which one I was like, I guess I don't like that. And so for years and years I've thought, I don't really like cross stitch. So stay tuned for a little later in this episode when I tell you about the cross stitch projects I'm going to be doing. Because as it turns out, a few years ago I started working on my dollhouse again, my childhood dollhouse. I wanted to do it all over and make it really beautiful and more like an adult collectible than a child's toy. And in the process of researching things, I bumped into all these ladies making these absolutely beautiful Petit point carpets. And if you're not familiar with Petit point, it's basically just needlepoint, like, you know, the kind of work that's done on a canvas, usually with like a 10 stitch or a half cross stitch. And there's other stitches, but I think that's the most common. And you just cover the entire piece of canvas. You'll see it a lot of times on, like, for pillows or chairs, like dining chair will have, like, you know, the upholstery on the back, and the seat or be upholstered with needlepoint. So Petit point is just needlepoint on a smaller holes per inch canvas. So I saw all these ladies doing this and I thought, I'm gonna give it a try. So I bought a pattern, bought a yard of the canvas and the floss, and I started doing it and I got hooked. It is so addictive and so much fun. And I made one carpet and then a second one, and I've got another big one started. I've made little ones in between. I'm basically just obsessed with it now. And a little while ago, I was working away on it and I realized this is counted stitch work. And I got thinking about cross stitch and I thought, I bet I would love cross stitch, like really love it, because after all, the project I'm working on now, I'm actually doing a cross stitch across the entire canvas. And cross stitching is basically the same thing, except you don't have to cover the entire canvas and you're just using fabric instead of the canvas, but they're cousins, these two crafts. So I got really excited and I actually ordered a cross stitch kit and another little piece of cloth to play around with, and I'm totally gonna give it a go. So you'll have to stay tuned and see if I like it. So that's me in a nutshell. So I thought now I'll just show you a few of my projects. And what I pulled for you is one crewel project that I've done that I really, really love. Most of my embroidery has been for historic costume or the dolls, but this is one I did that's just purely decorative. Here you can see. This one is called Rabbiting On, and it's a wool threads worked on a linen ground. And the design is by a designer called Philippa Turnbull. Now, fun fact, I saw this online as a kit and I was like, I love that. I was just itching to stitch it, but her kits are very pricey. And at the time I was just like, oh, I don't know if I can spend that much on a kit when the fabric and the floss are so much cheaper alone. And I know the designer worked really hard and made this design and she totally deserves the money for it. But just where I was at right there, I was like, I don't want to spend the money right now, especially because it also included shipping from the UK. I think it would, if it had been here in the US, I probably would have just bought the kit, but I didn't. But I decided to buy this book, A-Z of Crewel Embroidery, because I just wanted a crewel book that went through the stitches so that if I had any question about a particular stitch or was looking for inspiration, I could find it. And the book includes a bunch of different patterns that you can make. And imagine how my head fell off when I got to this page. There it was. It was the design that I was dying to work. Apparently, Philippa Turnbull submitted it to the book. So I was in luck and I ordered the right colors, got the fabric, and off I went. And I actually ended up stitching this design 3 times because I thought my grandmother will really love this. She loves thistles. My whole family's from Scotland, so we have a soft spot for thistles. So I was stitching one for her and one for me. And then my mom saw it. My mom also likes thistles, but she also loves bunnies. So she was like, "Aw." So I stitched a 3rd time. So we all have the same one, and that was a real blast. And then the other projects I pulled are my dollhouse carpet projects, because I thought I talked about them, I should show them. And all of these that I'm going to show you are worked by a designer called Elli Jenks. And I'll put links to everything down below, of course, as one does. So if you see anything and you're like, I gotta have that, it will all be down below. The first one I'm showing you here is called Heath Lodge. I just think this is so beautiful. This one, I love this. I don't know how to say it. I think it's Obusan style. All the flowers and just the rococo of it. I just love it. And this took me a really, really long time to stitch. It's on a 22 hole per inch canvas, and I am working over just the one hole, so it's 22 stitches per inch. I just did the tent stitch or the half cross stitch, so that kind of helped it be a little faster than doing a full cross, but it still took me a really long time. And I got done with the whole thing and realized I didn't know how to do the edging, and I couldn't find any videos showing how to do the edging online. So that's actually something I'm going to film in the near future for anyone else who gets stuck like that. So what I did was I worked up the middle, just like a mini carpet, just the middle motif, because I was so afraid of ruining this carpet I had spent all this time on. So I made a little tiny one that could be a doormat to match, and learned to do the edge stitch on that, and it turned out great. So I went back and edge stitched the other one, and now I do think I'm going to back these with silk just to kind of keep keep it tidy and everything. But other than that, those two projects are done. So then, because I was addicted, I started another one, and this one is called Cook Chambers. And as you can see, this one is not done. The stitching of it is done, but I have not blocked it or edged it. Both these carpets I worked without a frame, and people tell you if you're going to do tent stitch you have to have a frame or the canvas will distort and your project will be terrible. But I mean, this one looked like this, but the magic of blocking, people, I was able to make it totally square, so luckily that worked out. And I think this one will go too. I have to get around to doing it. I think I really just love the stitching more than I love the finishing, which from watching a lot of floss tubes I think is probably a common sentiment. So that's those. And then the one I'm working on now is called Newton Abbot, and this is the design. Oh, and I should mention on the first carpet I worked it in the recommended colors, but Cook Chambers, I think the original color palette was blue and gold and purple, and I swapped out the blue for a green. If I'm remembering correctly, that was the color range that I swapped because I had just finished that mostly blue carpet and I wanted something with a different feel. And I think this is more of kind of a Regency era style. But I do know that putting green and purple together was a trend in the Georgian era, so I thought it's plausible. I'm going for it. So that is one change I made. But Newton Abbot, I'm working in the prescribed colors, and this is how far I am. So all of the carpets I've done so far have been a blast. Like, I've loved every stitch. Newton Abbot, not so much. I know it's going to be beautiful when it's done. The designer did a glorious job. The mixing of the different shades gives like nice depth. It's really going to be so beautiful, but stitching colors that are, it's like, this is like 3 different ranges of colors. It's not all one solid, and it's really hard to see. And this is the first one I'm doing where I'm using a full cross stitch, not just the half stitch. So once I put the row go one way and then I try to come back, I really can't see it. So I can really only work this one if I'm in like some serious bright daylight, or if I'm like hunched over with my light basically in my eyeballs. This one's been a challenge to work on. So I think I might actually, instead of being monogamous like I have been to my projects, I think I might get a second project going, because sometimes in the evening I want to sit in this room that I'm in now, my living room. But the lighting isn't quite as good as up in my sewing room. So I just want a project for my living room days and for traveling, because again, it's just too hard to see it. But I will finish this one because the finished result is going to be just gorgeous.